just want to take a moment and say thank you for joining us this morning. Hopefully the weather is as beautiful where you are as it is here in the DC area today. It's gorgeous. We are talking a little today about cryptocurrency and retirement plans, which is a hot topic. So we're excited to present this coffee break today. Housekeeping items, we are recording this session. It will be posted on our YouTube channel as well as our website shortly. And we ask if you have questions, please pop those in the chat. We'll try to hold those for the end because we have some content we want to get through. Let's see, I think those are the housekeeping items. So just a brief introduction. I'm Lisa Weber-Raley. I am the Chief Research Officer at Greenwald Research. And I have Matt Ceryanec, right? Or Ceryanec.
Ceryanec, you got it.
Ceryanec.
Right.
With us today, he's a director here at Greenwald. And full disclosure, I'm a health researcher. So this topic is completely new to me. So I have some really basic questions for Matt that I'm hoping he can answer for me today and for the rest of us. But before we dive in, I wanted to cue up how this project came to be. So if you can go ahead and jump ahead, Matt, I want to talk a little bit about our Shark Tank. So in spring this year, we conceptualized this idea of a research incubator. And essentially, we went through a very quick process to get these projects in the field. And really, it was a way to sort of engage and excite our staff in getting involved in project topics. And it was a really fun exercise, I think, for all of us. We went through this process really fast, right? We went from announcing the incubator, I think, on a Monday to having the winning projects. We actually chose 2 by a Tuesday the following week. So it was a really fun process, I think, for our staff. Ideation process was about a week long. We gave our staff a week, any level, any role, to come up with an idea and submit a proposal. The following Monday, we had a set of presentations. And then by Tuesday, we had selected actually our winning 2 projects. And really, we were looking for hot topics. And I think Matt struck on a really good one because we did get 5 submissions. And of the 5 submissions we got, 3 of them were about cryptocurrency. So obviously something that everyone had top of mind. The other winning submission that we selected was about the financial impacts of seeking out mental health care or behavioral health care. So look for that coming soon. Another really hot topic in the health space. So we're going to move along and talk a little bit about crypto because it really was a hot topic in the spring. It remains a hot topic now. So let's talk a little to Matt. Matt, can you tell us a little bit about how your idea came to be, why it was interesting to you? What spurred this interest really?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think to be frank, first of all, kind of the first consideration I made was whether or not there would be like appetite for research into this topic, whether there would be interest out there to learn about this. And I think certainly as hot a topic as cryptocurrency within the kind of financial industry is, I thought certainly this would probably meet some sort of demand for further kind of learning on this topic. But I guess for me, more personally, there were a couple of interests, I think, in doing this research. So, I mean, first and foremost, it's just a really interesting time to talk about anything finance and money related right now with, all the economic volatility we've seen with inflation to some of the, interesting stock market behaviors lately. I think cryptocurrency certainly is a component of a lot of this financial chaos, for lack of a better word, that we've seen recently. So it's just a topic that's been pretty top of mind for me, and I think a lot of other people as well. And in terms of cryptocurrency specifically, it's just been interesting to see over the past few years the growing number of ways that consumers are using it and some of the different functions of cryptocurrency we've been seeing. It's, I think, it seemed to evolve into something with broader applications than it was initially intended to serve as kind of just this niche digital currency. One particular kind of use that we're starting to see is this long-term investment application and having it potentially be used as a retirement savings strategy. So that brings me to kind of my second interest. I said there's kind of a couple for me, which is the interest around this news that hit earlier this year that Fidelity, for all you that are familiar, if not, I'll kind of explain as we get a little bit further into this, but Fidelity announced they would offer cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin, which is a type of cryptocurrency, investment options into certain employer-sponsored retirement plans. So I have to admit, I was pretty surprised by this announcement and certainly intrigued. So not only did I do my own research in terms of understanding the news and just kind of following along, but I was able to fortunately have an opportunity to develop this formal research that would help, understand other people's thoughts and ideas around the topic. So yeah, I guess that leads us to where we are now.
Yeah, and if you don't mind going over some of the objectives or goals that you had when you conceptualize the research, because sort of from our perspective, when we were choosing winning projects, one of the things that we were looking for is really sort of clarity around what the objectives of the research would be.
Right. Yeah. I'll keep it pretty high level here because I think there's a lot we wanted to accomplish with the research, and we'll get into a lot of that. But just the most important things, I think it boiled down to three things. So first, we just wanted to understand the market for cryptocurrency amongst consumers right now. I think we all have an idea of what that is, but as it relates to retirement, especially, we wanted to get a handle on what that market is, what the demand is, what the appetite is. So from there, we wanted to just gauge reactions to this news surrounding Bitcoin within 401k plans, just really dive into what people think and kind of what the sentiment is around this kind of new idea. And then ultimately, we wanted to get a handle on kind of the likelihood or the interest in employers actually going ahead and offering this to their consumers. So I think it's one thing to be interested and have, kind of some talk about it, but whether or not they're actually interested in offering this and moving forward with it was something that we wanted to try to seek out.
Okay. So I'm going to sort of play the dummy, for lack of a better word, right? So I can talk all day about HSAs and health plan design and sort of clinically integrated networks, you name the hot topic in health. But when it comes to cryptocurrency, I think I'm coming from a very novice place. So if you don't mind sort of level setting what exactly cryptocurrency is for me, for some of the others on the call, I think that'd be really helpful as we start to talk about how this might tie into retirement.
Yeah, absolutely. In full disclosure, I'm no cryptocurrency expert myself. I just do research in it. But for anyone on the call who is a cryptocurrency expert, I apologize. Bear with me for a couple of minutes while I try to kind of set the stage here so that we're all on at least somewhat of an even playing ground here. So, I realize everyone's probably heard of cryptocurrency at this point. In fact, I'm almost sure they have, but there's probably a pretty wide range of familiarity amongst even our group today. So just want to, start by providing a really brief overview and kind of explanation for those that might be a little bit less educated. So again, we can kind of set the stage. So, cryptocurrency is essentially this umbrella term that refers to any digital currency that is intended to be removed from traditional, financial institutions like banks and the government. So the idea is to allow consumers anywhere, anytime to send and receive payments using this digital currency. It doesn't exist in physical form. It exists within like computer networks. So one of the main goals is to essentially avoid using third-party intermediaries to conduct these payments and transact the cryptocurrency. So that's kind of the point of it. Certainly they're not anywhere nearly as adopted as traditional forms of currency yet. I should caveat yet. But they've found increasingly widespread use and can be used to purchase tons of goods and services currently, online especially. But there's been instances where they've been used in larger financial transactions, like at car dealerships, even, I know, is one application of them. And I've seen that some have even accepted cryptocurrency instead of like a salary or wage. So, there's really widespread adoption for it. Ultimately, tons of different types of cryptocurrencies worth all sorts of different amounts at any given point in time, similar to kind of how the stock market behaves. In fact, interestingly, one recent criticism, I should say, of cryptocurrency is its kind of correlation to the stock market in terms of the ebbs and flows, which previously it had been kind of used to hedge against. So that's kind of something we're seeing with it recently. Now, in terms of the types of cryptocurrency, I want to focus on Bitcoin, which, again, if you're familiar, apologies, just bear with me for a second, but Bitcoin is by far the most popular and most valuable type of cryptocurrency. Created, I think, in like 2009. It's been around for a while relative to kind of the recent interest we've seen, and experienced, as you can see on this chart, some pretty slow and steady growth over several years until about late 2020, when really several factors, the pandemic certainly had an impact on this, drove interest and ownership to really unprecedented levels. We saw prices skyrocket. Right now, I believe the price of Bitcoin is somewhere around $19,000, which it's both well above what we saw like pre-pandemic, but as you can see, also well below some of those heights that we reached in the pandemic late in 2020 and throughout much of 2021, which, it indicates that this is an extremely volatile type of currency, which I think has ultimately led to a real polarization of thoughts and opinions on it, and kind of its increasing levels of adoption among consumers around the world. So I want to next kind of get into, now that we've kind of explained what it is for those that might not be familiar, just kind of
Thank you.
get at where we stand currently. So I think it's especially important to get a grasp on where we're at right now with how the markets have been just really quite volatile lately, taking a beating, especially crypto. It's really as important a time as ever to get a grasp on the interest and adoption, ownership, and kind of potential future of cryptocurrency, as this feels like a little bit of a pivotal moment. So I feel like there's three broad metrics that are useful to help paint the picture of where we're at with crypto right now. So first, awareness, just looking at the landscape at sort of this broadest level, like we see pretty high levels of awareness. Pretty much everyone's heard of it. And levels of familiarity are kind of correlating with that. They're relatively high, certainly compared to just a few years ago. We would have seen familiarity skew much more towards like that not at all familiar part of the chart. So it's now gotten to where about 4 out of 5 say they're at least somewhat familiar with crypto. So really seeing that tick up. And this, I should say, this has been driven in large part by this new kind of younger generation of investors who take sort of I'd call it a DIY approach to investing. They tend to be younger and male, and usually have higher levels of investable assets. We do see increased levels of awareness across all demographic categories, but proportionally, it's increased much more within certain subgroups like this one I've just mentioned. Next, in terms of education, I think the important thing to note here is what we see is a lot of self-directing, self-teaching, without much formal educational kind of resources on cryptocurrency as a topic, like there are for a lot of other financial topics. Consumers mostly resort to doing their own research, essentially. And online resources are certainly where people seek the most information. Social media and search engines like Google are leading the categories there. So, it's important to note that I think on one hand, this allows pretty much everyone to access that information and learn, and a lot of people are doing that. But unfortunately, I think on the other hand, this has the potential to lead to potentially a lower quality of education on the topic, and potentially an incomplete understanding on some aspects of cryptocurrency. So kind of an interesting point to note there. And then finally, just looking at ownership of cryptocurrency, actually, we see a pretty big impact from the cryptocurrency boom kind of during the pandemic here, certainly with many going from, aware and even educated to actually pulling the trigger and purchasing a lot for the first time in the past year or two during the pandemic. I think, in fact, half of cryptocurrency owners say they purchased it within the past 2 years. And to kind of give a little bit more of a detailed sense on where we're at there. Again, first on the left here, we see cryptocurrency ownership kind of graphically represented here. So current ownership is at 46% of consumers, with another 10% who say they've previously owned cryptocurrency. So this actually makes crypto, whether current or previous, more common than not in terms of ownership. I don't think it was long ago that we went over that threshold to where it was more common than not. These numbers were certainly substantially lower a year or two ago. So we're at this point where it's really penetrating the consumer market. And as you can see in that middle chart there, when consumers first purchase cryptocurrency, it really skews to that more recent time period than more in the distant past. 67% purchased within the past 3 years. And then I won't really get into the weeds much with the types of cryptocurrency owned there in that final chart, other than just to say Bitcoin clearly is far and away the most common cryptocurrency owned. So that's kind of just demonstrating that. And then kind of lastly, one last kind of point on where we're at with cryptocurrency. So as you may or may not be aware, depending on, I guess, how much you follow cryptocurrency and kind of the financial news, there was a relatively significant cryptocurrency market downturn earlier this year, and towards the late spring, early summer. And like I mentioned, the markets for cryptocurrency certainly fluctuate to quite a large degree, but this really was one of the quicker, more dramatic kind of crashes we've seen. So from our research, we saw the following impacts to consumer sentiment on just general outlook and investing. And I think this tells us a few things. So first and foremost, this substantial market drop does have an impact on consumer demand and interest, as we could all probably guess would be the case. However, it's not a massive shift necessarily, only slightly more are indicating they're less interested due to this market downturn. And there's a decent chunk of consumers who actually fall into a mindset of being more interested in cryptocurrency when a market dips. This is likely due to their ability to purchase at a lower amount. But there's even a bigger subset who claim that the downturn hasn't had any impact on their interest. So kind of an interesting point there to see how the market fluctuation impacts sentiment, and kind of some of the thoughts towards crypto we're seeing more recently.
Okay. It's really interesting to see some of the uptake in the data, because sort of I think we all get in our bubbles where we either are in or out, and I guess I'm from the generation that's not in. But it's really interesting to see that. Can you tell us a little bit more about how they're feeling about cryptocurrency? Because all of this background makes me nervous, and I don't even have crypto, right? This is a really volatile thing. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's quite a polarizing topic. There seems to be a couple of camps out there, in my opinion, that are on one hand kind of bought into the idea of cryptocurrency and find it to be new and innovative. But on the other hand, I think you certainly have skeptics who find a great deal of fault in the, unpredictable, volatile nature of cryptocurrencies and the way they've behaved so far. So with that said, though, ultimately, an interesting kind of tidbit from our research is that ultimately we do see sentiment skew positively among consumers. Again, this is especially true for our younger consumers, but in a word association, as you can see on this chart here, positive words used to describe cryptocurrency outrank negative words, indicating that there's kind of a needle pointing in favor currently in terms of sentiment and kind of feelings. I'll say this is also reflected in some of the optimism that we've seen that consumers have with their estimates on the future value of cryptocurrency. So even with this volatility in mind, in the recent market slump from earlier this summer, we see half who say it'll be worth more in 2 years, and actually 2/3 saying it'll be worth more 5 years. So a lot of optimism there, but it's important to kind of address both sides, that even with that optimism, we still see a substantial segment of the population who are seemingly not only uninterested or not bought into it, but almost seem fundamentally opposed to the idea of cryptocurrency. So to me, this kind of indicates a bit of a line drawn in the sand where folks have ended up on one side or the other. Not to say there aren't plenty who are still on the fence and more undecided. In fact, that might be most people, but just to reiterate my point, it's quite a polarizing topic to say the least. And speaking of that polarization, what we see kind of on the side of folks who aren't bought in or aren't interested is what I wanted to call out here. So this is kind of the reasons why folks are not interested in purchasing cryptocurrency. And you can probably guess what some of the top reasons are, but just to summarize, the reasons are essentially risk and lack of knowledge. So when we look at the reasons that consumers are not likely to purchase cryptocurrency, what rises to the top of this list of concerns is its riskiness and volatility, including like cybersecurity risks even, and then lack of knowledge and cryptocurrency like still feeling too new to some. So that's kind of where we're at with thoughts and feelings on crypto.
So it's really interesting to think about that perspective of risk and volatility. Can you talk a little bit about how does that relate to retirement in light of Fidelity's news, right? Because, obviously Greenwald does a ton of work on retirement and retirement preparedness and savings. So what's the connection there?
Right. So I think the answer is kind of obvious, I guess, but there's a couple different ways to approach it here. So just starting with the broader explanation, then drilling down into that more specific example. So of course, again, apologies if I'm stating the obvious here, but like any investment opportunity, purchasing cryptocurrencies can be used to grow money for any given period of time, whether that be a week, a year, 10 years. It can be seen as an investment like any other investment. So while it's certainly, like we've established, volatile and has its unique characteristics, there are certainly folks who are purchasing cryptocurrencies with the intent to leave their money in it for an extended period of time, and potentially using that as a source of income in retirement. So, it seems like much of the appeal with cryptocurrencies, if you follow it in the news, is its ability to turn this quicker profit relative to other, more traditional forms of investment options. In fact, one pretty amazing example of this actually is that from the beginning of 2021 to about mid-April 2021, so little over a quarter, the value of Bitcoin essentially doubled, which yielded about 100% return on investment in basically a quarter. So there's a lot of potential for quick growth, and it might be safe to think that that's what consumers are interested in. They want to make a quick buck, but interestingly, our survey actually indicated otherwise. It kind of indicated the opposite. More than twice as many consumers say they're interested in cryptocurrencies for long-term growth than are for short-term gains. It was something like 43% long-term, 18% short-term. The remaining like 39% say they're equally interested in both. And even further, when we ask cryptocurrencies, as you can see here, whether they're current or previous cryptocurrency owners, what the most appealing aspect of the currency was in their decision to purchase, the top answer selected by just over 3/4 was the potential for long-term financial gain. So that's the number one reason people are purchasing. And, while this idea of using crypto to invest and save for retirement is certainly not as adopted as things like traditional retirement plans at this point, there's clearly an appetite we can see growing amongst consumers, many of whom are already actually purchasing and investing for retirement purposes. So that leads me into, like I mentioned kind of at the beginning of the previous slide, the more specific tie-in that we're talking about here with Fidelity that some of you may be aware of, but if not, to give kind of a quick primer here. So in April of this year, Fidelity, who's one of the nation's largest retirement plan providers, announced that it would allow 401k plan participants to invest up to 20% of their plan into Bitcoin, which would be made available later in this year. Important to note that this option would be only available to employees who participate in a 401k plan through an employer who decides to offer it. So not just anyone can go and do this. It has to be through an employer who offers it. As you can imagine, this was met with pretty mixed reactions. one side saying this is too volatile, too risky to be tied with something like retirement savings. The other side essentially saying this is just meeting a consumer demand. And they're just kind of providing what consumers are already hungry for. So that's kind of where we're at with the news currently.
So that's pretty big news from Fidelity. What did our research tell us? Are consumers legitimately interested in this idea of putting, sort of diversifying their retirement portfolio and using Bitcoin or other cryptos?
Mm-hmm. Right. So, I mean, I'll try to give you kind of the briefest, most high level answer as I can here, but that's certainly a nuanced, there's certainly a nuanced answer to that with a lot of different layers and demographic differences and things like that, which we certainly get into in the research. But just looking at some of the high level consumer feedback here to kind of summarize, we do actually, maybe surprising to some, ultimately see a lean in consumer mindset towards interested in participating with something like this. It's certainly not everyone, it's definitely not everyone, but the majority of consumers agree, as you can see, with each of the following statements, which are essentially, positive statements regarding this new offering. Specifically, I want to call out the second bar, which is essentially saying the majority, 60%, are interested in investing a portion of their 401k into Bitcoin. So again, kind of at a high, broad level here, get much more into the weeds with the research in terms of who's interested, how much, et cetera. This is kind of what we're seeing at the top line.
That's really interesting. And I know we're real tight on time here, and I want to make sure we leave time for Q&A. And if you have Q&A, go ahead and put those in the chat and I can sort through those. But, you mentioned something earlier, which is the employer is the gatekeeper. And, what did employers say in the research you did, Matt, about this idea? Because they're the ones that have got to choose to integrate it into their 401k plan or not.
Yeah, it's a great question. Again, tons of content there in the research in terms of what they said, a lot of feedback from employers, somewhat mixed reactions, but I would say one of the things that surprised me is kind of the separation between consumer and employer outlook on this topic. I think we definitely saw differing levels of interest between consumers, individual consumers, and employers who would actually be offering this. So to not get like too into the weeds with all of the feedback we got from them, I think there's a lot of hesitation, a lot of nervousness, a lot of points of contention that they have, questions certainly compared to consumers, which we saw a little bit more interest from. So yeah, really one of the surprising things is kind of the difference we saw between those two groups.
All right, we've got a couple of questions. I think we can go ahead and skip to the next slide there, Matt, because I do want to mention, I know this was just a taste of what you did with this research. And these are some of the core questions that you have answered in the white paper, which we're going to have available soon. But I wanted to touch on a couple questions I got. A question about the 46% of people who have crypto. Did we see differences in exactly who is interested in crypto or owning crypto right now, especially around demographics?
In a word, extremely. Yes, this was a very skewed interest demographically. Again, you don't want to get too much into the weeds. I know we're short on time, but really pretty stark differences between demographic groups, gender, age, financial kind of outlook, all those things. Pretty stark differences. Again, that was one of the more surprising things I think we saw in the research. This is not a one size fits all product. Certainly there are target markets here without a doubt. But to, kind of answer your question without getting too into the weeds, definitely some pretty stark differences demographically.
Yeah, and I think that relates to a question we've got here from Carl. Carl, thank you for putting that in the chat. He sort of opines here that maybe this is something that makes sense to put in target date funds, sort of a 1% allocation kind of thing, especially for younger participants. Seems like that the research might bear that out. Is that fair, Matt?
Yeah, I think so. Like we saw, there's an interest in basically investing in cryptocurrency for long term, for the long haul. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but far more interested in investing in cryptocurrency for long-term gains than short-term gains, which is kind of counter to the perception that I had about what folks are interested in cryptocurrency for. It just seems like there's a lot of volatility and people purchasing and then selling really quickly. But at least the intent of those who are going in and purchasing cryptocurrency is to purchase and invest it for a long period of time. So I think that would fit that need, certainly.
We are right at 11:30, wow, a couple minutes over, actually. If any last questions, comments? Okay, so we'll have some information going out on our website about the paper. Matt, you can skip forward to, I think, the last slide that's got our website address on there. We have all our coffee breaks up there. They're recorded always. We always have them up on our YouTube page as well. We'll be releasing the white paper soon, and that will be available for purchase along with the data, if that's something that you're interested in buying. But thank you everyone for coming. And if you have any questions, feel free to stay on, but we'll make sure everyone can get back to their day.